from what you've said, the book really was born during the pandemic. You had time on your hand to revisit your archive. And what was that experience like?
That was an incredible experience. Even thinking about it, I get sort of goosebumps, because there were all these subconscious tunnels connecting work from 1982 to 2019, people that were present for 40 years in my archive, and for the younger generation, my archive, like most photographers of my age, lived either in negatives or contact sheets. And contact sheets are that tiny images that you can look at with a loupe. But if you make contact sheets as badly as I did, you get some are very dark, some are very light. So I could never see everything. And there was no question of really engaging with the images either, because you could only afford to make a print if a magazine or a book was paying you. So if I had been commissioned to do something and I needed those images, I would look for those images. So for example, while I was looking at my archive of the 80s, I found that I had spent one Guru Purnima in Kishoriji's house. Now, it's impossible to forget something like that. But time passes, and I guess I'm 60 now, and one forgets. And so the archive was full of these surprises. And somewhere I would say, did I take that picture? Was I really in her house? And then I recognize myself in her eyes. I recognize that she's telling me, that we're communicating. But there were so many surprises and so many people that I may have been in touch with, not been in touch with, but they're so present in my archive, and I'm very happy. I won't ask him to stand because he'll be very embarrassed, but one of them, Mahinder Singh, is here in this room, And there's amazing pictures of him in the book, and of Jeru, and it's like the first person I wanted to send the book to them was to them, and that's what I did. So it was this incredible connecting back with people, with situations, and understanding the web of my work. It's an archive of 40 years. And I thought that's it. That's my work. Because with COVID, we were all very aware of, are we going to, continue? Will we be around? And everybody, I'm sure, was thinking of wills and trusts and what to do. And I just thought, my God, if I drop dead tomorrow, which was very likely at that time in May, this archive, these contact sheets must survive. Negatives I'm not bothered about. They could be burnt along with me, and that would be fine, bad for the environment, but anyway, it's a problem with negatives on how you get rid of them. But the contact sheets, so I don't know, for all the young photographers in the room, or anyone wanting to be a photographer, really the most valuable thing we have as image makers is that archive. And then slowly the archive starts to reveal itself to you. And there was, in fact, one image. It's in that corner, there's a man looking at himself in the mirror. It was one of the first images I've taken. And when I looked at it in my archive, I thought, my God, I was such a fine photographer. What happened? And then I looked more, and then there's that lovely one of the lady, Dayanita Singh, with her hair, and I saw that. Then there were 3 or 4 images that said, wait a minute, there is something amazing happening here. And suddenly, because I'm not this photographer anymore, I can't photograph like this. So I became like a third person, saying, my God, what a fine photographer this person was till she became a photographer. And then I started to edit with how I photographed, which was these sort of in-between moments where you didn't know what had just happened, but there was this question, what did they see? What did the camera see? So for example, there's that wonderful picture of Martin Singh. I can say it's wonderful because I feel it's from another person. And he's looking at Bharat Sikka, who's on the back cover. And I didn't see that, but the camera saw it. And therefore, let's see became the guiding principle for making this edit. And making the edit was still easy. The really difficult part was to make the sequence. And so I made dummy after dummy, which we call a maquette, to build a narrative which would never be completely clear. Because I wanted to keep pulling, just when you think that there's a beautiful section of things going on with hair, I wanted to pull the rug from under your feet, because I wanted to bring you into the novel. And so the sequencing, I could say, took me the best part of COVID. Again and again, make a maquette, leave it, doesn't work. This doesn't work. And so the whole thing just kept mutating until we actually went to press.
So you've touched on a couple of things that I want to visit through the conversation in more detail, but the first is really this idea of the archive. And so though Let's See it manifested itself during COVID, you had the time, you had access to your contact sheets. The idea of having an archive, it was seeded in 1992, wasn't it, by someone?
That's true.
And I think that's important to kind of think through, and also where you were in your career at that point, and to be told by someone that the most important thing for a photographer is an archive.
This was Walter Keller, the great publisher of Scalo Books, who I went to see in 1992 in Zurich. And he looked at my work and he said, I have no doubt you'll be a great photographer, but do not make books, do not make exhibitions, build your archive while you still have the energy, because you won't have this energy later. And somehow I believed him. And so from that time till I made the Mona book, there was hardly anything that I put out. I just kept photographing and building the archive. While at NID, I was also building the archive. I didn't realize I was building the archive. I was just, at NID, it was more like a caress of, I'm seeing Rajiv and I'm with Shilpa, and I just want a little impression. It wasn't like I'm going to make a photograph. So there was one kind of archive that built up there. And then when Walter Keller told me that, it's very easy for me to say no to an exhibition or say no to a book, because I would much rather just be building the archive. And which is why in COVID, when I thought I would die like everybody else, I thought at least my contact sheets are there.
And I think I want to, the moment in when he gave you that advice in 1992, it harkens to what you just mentioned, having an eye that you don't have anymore. Because it was also a point of transition for you. You had been in NID and then you went to New York. And this book is comprised of all those pictures that were taken prior. And can you talk about what you felt happened to you when you went to a school of photography? Because as I've said and written about, and I think we've spoken about a lot also, is that your foundation as a maker and artist was not in a program of photography. You were at NID. You were skilled, or you were made to be skilled and to think in a lateral manner with so many different other faculties and facilities which bear down on what you make. And so I think transitioning from that kind of pedagogical environment, which was happening in India in the 80s, which was also a specific moment, to going to a photo program. What is that? How did that? And this book is a kind of testament to that early moment of...
Yeah, I really wish somebody had seen my work. The problem was it only lived in the contact sheet, so I can't even blame anyone else. Because if I saw those contact sheets, I would hold the person by the shoulder today and say, listen, you're doing fine, just keep doing this. You don't need to go to New York. Because when I went to New York and I saw all the great canon of photography, I felt terrible about my work. Farooq Chotia, please come here. I felt like, my pictures were out of focus. They were not like photographs. They were just like little whispers, like little caresses of events and all that. People I was in conversation with, my friends, people I met. At ICP, people were doing major photography. And it was the first time I was learning about photography. At NIT in that time, there was no photography course. So I studied visual communication, But in our foundation course, we had design process, which I think Radhi will agree with me. I'm sure you will also agree. It's something that we just still live by, you know. So arriving yesterday for a book launch, and you're all invited for a book launch. But then the book launch becomes an exhibition. And then we say, no, we keep the exhibition on. But then what if the books get sold? Then we have empty nails, but we keep that on also. So somehow, NID's grounding was far more significant, I think, than I realized.
Yeah.
And textiles, product design, furniture design, it's like constantly being pushed to think out of the box. So, not to put down any art schools, but I'm really glad that I didn't go to a conventional art school. I found a rejection letter from JJ to my parents in the archive saying, so sorry, we cannot take your daughter. So I found it. Now I forgot what I was saying. Anyway.
So this idea of, you know, your sensibility being formed at NID and then kind of going to ICP and then building the archive through the 90s. And now we're here with Let's See, and you know, Let's See comes after many years of you expanding how your work is seen, distributed, received, understood. And Let's See in itself does not exist as just a photo novel. It has a life as a constructed contact sheet, as Stephanie Rosenthal, the curator of your retrospective, or your survey show, rather, at Walter Gropius-Bau, calls it. And so, you know, I want to kind of, you know, you spoke about the contact sheet. You're on the cover of the book amongst your contact sheets. You've already kind of addressed the way you approach sequencing as built and coming out of the contact sheet. But the contact sheet also became the basis for another leap you made, which was bringing a kind of conceptual armature to the work, which is creating portable museum structures. But now you've constructed a contact sheet itself for Let's See. And so how do you perceive the relationship between the photo novel, as you call it, or the book form of Let's See, and the constructed contact sheet, which is on the wall?
You know, I have to admit, the book is really the work for me. And the exhibition and the structures is almost like a catalogue of the book. So the book came first. The editing was done for the book. And then Stephanie Rosenthal was very keen to have it in the exhibition because she said, it's your oldest work, but it's also your newest work. But then I couldn't just make another museum for it. And so I developed this structure, which is like these contact sheets that can keep changing. But the contact sheet, because for, let's say, 30 years, I looked at 36 images on one page. Or when I went to medium format, 12 images. So I read images like this, like all of us, but I read them up and down, I read them diagonally, I read them. And that whole folder of my contact sheets, or folders, I have 100 folders of them, that's my diary, that's my life. My family is there, that is my family. And somehow when I came into the art world, and there was the idea of a single image, the single print, I was always very dissatisfied with it because for me images existed in relation to each other. So especially Bombay, a lot of this book is from Bombay. I would be spending a lot of time, say in Zakir's house. But then suddenly I'm in Pali Hill with my friends. Then I've suddenly gone to Kamatipura and those pictures are there. So for me, then I'm back to Zakir. So all of these people coexist, they exist together. It was just the idea in the book world as well as the art world, you know, this is the Zakir work, this is the Mona work. But for me, those separations didn't make sense. So in Museum of Chance, I was able to mix it up. And in Let's See, there was no question of, you know, going into any chronological or, it was really based on the Let's See. So I don't know if that answers what you were saying. But
to an extent, and I think, you know, to press you a bit further on that, I think when I saw the exhibition and I saw the the installation of, let's see, as a constructed contact sheet before I
Yeah.
arrived at
Yeah.
the book, even though, as you said, the book came first. But
In my head.
In your head. And I think that there is, for me, the way I received the installation of the images differently from when I go through the book.
Yeah.
Because the book has, and from this I want to talk about the book itself, but the book has a kind of momentum, a propulsive nature, like which books do, because you move through them sequentially, through sequence, and whether they're demarcated through chapter or not, or they're interludes, prologues, epilogues, whatnot, but there's a propulsive motion and movement. But that's diffused in the installation, and I'm curious about what you feel about that, the idea of momentum and, you know, what that means in the context of a book and harnessing literary form.
Yeah.
Because that's something you've also explored many times before, maybe alluding to sonnets or fiction writing, but now the novel. And then the diffusing of that kind of momentum you get in a book when you do the photo architectures or the constructed contact sheet.
So, because it was, Stephanie said she was so keen to have the Let's See work, and I made these giant contact sheets where you could keep changing the prints. And so I thought that's a way for me to keep shifting the narrative.
Yeah.
So in the book, there's one narrative because of the way the binding is. This book, I feel, could have been bound in a circular way. But there is no binding like that because you can really pick it up anywhere.
Yeah.
And so it would have to be like a balloon to look at it the way that I would like you to look at it. And the structures, I felt, became too flat. And for insurance reasons, they couldn't change the photos. Nobody was allowed to, except for the art handlers. And I said, just take one out from here and put it there so that somehow the exhibition keeps changing. So that was not possible. So I must say that for me, the book is the work. That's more a catalogue of all the images in the book.
And so the book itself, can we talk about the form, the size, the paper, and then one other feature, which I kind of find it's most pronounced, is the use of the gutter.
Yeah.
So maybe we can start with how you arrived at the size and the choice of paper, and then maybe we can talk about the gutter and the way
So if you can pass me the display. I wanted to make something that looked like a cheap photo novel, a cheap novel that you would buy on the Haji Ali crossing, you know, the pirated one. I mean, I know I will have made it the day a book of mine is pirated at Haji Ali. But I don't know if that's going to happen in my lifetime. But I wanted, you know how they have that shiny cover and not very good printing? But Steidl is my publisher. So when he said, what kind of a book do you want? I said, I want a book that doesn't look anything like a Steidl book. It has to be rough, and it has to implore you to read the images and to experience the images rather than look at them. And so I said, I'm going to put the gutter through the image. Because I want to sort of take the photoness away from the image. And I want it to be something that you can flip through like this, you know? So what I meant by the circle is, I wish this book could be bound like that. But it's not possible, like a round binding. And so he said, okay. And so he said, would you like me to use the literature paper? That he has a literature line, and so I said, yes, absolutely. And I said, but I don't want your perfect printing. I want it to be slightly dreamy, slightly not clear. And so Steidl, being Steidl, took it as a challenge, and he invented a new way of printing offset. So we have this book that is just full of these beautiful midtones, and you'll be, of course, able to smell the ink. But because of how he changed the process, you'll see a little shine. This is probably catching some, and that's because of the switch in the offset process. And then for the cover, because he doesn't keep paper like this, and this is too tacky for him, he went to a beer manufacturer. And you know how you buy a 6-pack of beer? So he used that as the cover, paper. And what is remarkable about this book, and I can't believe with this he kept it at 20 euros, so he's probably losing a lot of money, is something called auto binding. So that you can open it down like that and it's not going to break. Now you can see it. So like how a paperback is joined here, this is not joined. So this is called auto binding. And I think the secret to Steidl's printing is that while he does a beautiful tritone, he does a skeleton black as well. But in this book, he's outdone himself because it's really living in the midtones, which to me suggests that there's more here than just the photograph, that I want you to experience the image. And the gutter was put because I didn't want you to think of, oh, how beautiful the image is. Sometimes it's unfortunate because it's right in the middle of the kiss. But I also thought that you can read these as two images, and that's fine too. I wanted to take away the preciousness of the image, and great, he sort of indulged me in that, and he's actually very proud of it, and he loves to tell people that this is beer box paper, and this is literary paper, you're not supposed to print photos on it, but that's why we have a book that doesn't look like Steidl. And yet, only Steidl could do this.
And maybe now we can talk a little bit about the images themselves. So first, which camera were you using when you were making these pictures?
I was using a Pentax ME Super. Up to then, you just got the Pentax MX, or I can't remember, which was fully manual. And Pentax ME Super also had an automatic light meter reading. And Ranmal Jhala, who you may remember, came to see this camera because I came to NID with this camera, and he took it from my hands and he flung it on the bed and he said, "You'll never be a photographer with a camera like this. Get yourself a manual camera." And I was pretty disheartened, you know. But that's the only camera I had. And in those days, unlike today, you couldn't just get a camera. It had to be someone coming from abroad who would smuggle it in for you. You couldn't go to a shop and buy a camera. They were just not there. I think there was just the Agfa Click 3. So a friend of my father's, who's a German publisher, brought me this camera. That's why we wrote the story at the back, because what are the chances that the main man in my life is a German publisher, and I get my camera from a German publisher 40 years ago. ME Super.
So the pictures were made on that, and then now the pictures themselves. Stephanie has said that the central motif of the book is the body, and the way the body is seen in many different contexts and environments, and you know the registers in which the bodies are engaging and interacting with one another. And I think the book begins with it's this very precise, short sequence with a sense of touch. And then that, it kind of goes away. You have this really, you know, propulsive section on hair, as the way I see it really, and the way hair is seen in these different contexts as ornament, as decoration, you know, and the different ways in which hair functions in all these pictures. And then the book kind of keeps moving through these different chapters, but there's, of course, no text. There is no articulation of who these people are, where we are in time or place. You're meant to infer that through dress and interiors, and it almost starts to become immaterial, because initially it was like, I want to know who this person is, when this was taken, where was Dayanita, and then it just kind of became immaterial as I kept going on, because there were these movements, these currents, these motifs that kept moving through, and then closer to after the middle half of the book, you have this extremely moving and again very small section on mortality and death. You see a dead body, you see a furnace, and then you see mourners, and it's just like 3 double spreads that kind of has that. And then you turn the page, and then it's, I think, I don't know how many pages of just 2 people together in bed in different registers, a child and a mother, lovers, friends. And again, you come back to this idea of touch and the body being in contact, and the move from confrontations of mortality and death into the life-affirming nature of sharing space. And, you know, it's remarkable to see how you've kind of threaded that through, and how much of that was, and, you know, these are not, of course, things that have not been kind of defining about most of your other work, but for me to see it in, as you were saying, this mode or this register before you became aware that you were taking pictures feels, there's a kind of vulnerability there in the actual images. And I don't know how did it feel for you when you were apprehending these images?
At that time or now?
Now, when you were sequencing, really.
I couldn't believe it. It's really, in those days, for those of you who are of my generation, there was a lot of physicality between people. It also had to do with furniture and the lack of furniture. And so there was mattresses on the bed, and you sat on cushions on the floor. And you know, after you had a few drinks, then you just sort of lean on each other, and people are just, there was a lot of physicality in my life in the 80s and 90s. I'm not judging everybody else, but certainly in my life, it was a lot. There was a lot, and you always stood around with your hand on someone's shoulder. Usually it was somebody, you know, you were hugging, you were caressing, and it was just the way we were. Mr. Doshi explains it, because I saw that a lot in his house, is his furniture. Because the furniture is such that you end up sitting on the ground. And then once you're sitting on the ground, there's bound to be this sort of leaning over and a physicality or a kind of body, not bonding, but connected.
Casual intimacy,
Casual
sociability.
intimacy.
And the way the camera is apprehending people's gazes, the shifting of looks between people, there isn't a kind of trained looking to the camera.
Absolutely, absolutely. And that's such a big difference, because today, for the most seasoned person who will say, oh, Dayanita, just take my picture as it is. Even me, myself. You know, if you pick up your camera, and suddenly the muscles change, and thankfully I don't pull my cheeks in and put my tits out and all that, but that is what happens. And in those days, people were very, very relaxed about the camera, not so conscious of the camera. And I was not conscious of photography because I was not a photographer. I was just doing little impressions of people and my conversations. So typically the photographs would happen at a time when I was just in conversation with you, and so this would also be too far, because I only used a normal lens. I never had a wide angle, never had a tele. And so all the photos are in conversation distance. There's very few images from far away, because the photographs, the making of the photos, was part of the conversation. It was no big deal. And as I wrote on Instagram, it was as big, I mean, the photographs were part of the conversation. Nothing more, nothing less.
Yes.
There's no picture, I think, except maybe 2 or 3 where someone is posing. Somehow the idea of the pose was not there. I didn't know about the idea I didn't think of the idea of the pose. It's only after going to ICP, after studying what photography is, that I started to take like formal pictures, whether it was of people or of spaces. But yeah, which is why it made me so sad to look at these pictures. And when I went to ICP, I was really embarrassed. I wouldn't even show people my Zakir book, because I thought that was too fuzzy and rough and not like what I was seeing. It was certainly, I was nowhere near the canon of photography, photographers.
And I think, once you kind of get through the book a couple of times, and I overcame the desire to want to identify characters and people and place and everything, what it starts to, the kind of broader kind of commentary I was kind of extracting from it, outside of, yes, this being your world, and is access. Mm-hmm. This idea of access felt very kind of, it for me became the most, it undergird the whole book, because it's about your access to environments, whether they're interior domestic spaces with women, or a funeral home, or you're moving through all these different environments and the camera and the access it was providing you. So the way it kind of maps out social structure in where we were at that time, and what was it like to have that kind of access and to reflect on it now? Were you aware in the time when you were making the pictures that you had that privileged access and the camera was the reason you had that, and then you could even document it? Or did that kind of feel like a retroactive realization?
I think the kind of access I had then, I realized only now, when I was looking at the pictures. But at that time, I had become a photographer because I realized I could not become a photographer. I had taken to the camera because I thought, here is a gadget with which I can go anywhere in the world and make whatever life I want. So the easiest thing was to say, Auntie Ji, I'm so sorry, I can't get married because I'm a photographer. I can't have children. I would love to have children, but I'm a photographer. And then I had this mother who was really supportive and said, anyway, you're not meant for marriage. So don't even think about it. Have as many lovers as you want, but don't get married. So I was set. But photography gave me, the camera gave me the possibility then to travel wherever I liked, go into any situation. I wrote to the Miss India people in 92, 93 and said, can I come and photograph backstage? And I was somehow always very interested in never the stage, but the green room, probably because of the musicians that I photographed in the green room. And so they said yes. Then there used to be a glad rags manhunt in Bombay, where men would come in their underwear. And so I thought, since I've been to Miss India, I must go to the glad rags. So I wrote to Maureen Wadia, letter, got a letter back saying most welcome. So there are all these men in their chaddis in here as well. So somehow I had like this magic tool with which I could really go places. And then the pictures just lived in the contact sheets unless there was an assignment from Illustrated Weekly or something where they would then use the pictures. Glad rags was used somewhere, the Miss India nowhere, because also the editors were not interested in that kind of picture, you know? Because I missed the moment when Sushmita won and Aishwarya lost. But I had it backstage, but that they were not interested in. It was a big thing in those days, you know, because everybody thought Aishwarya would win. It was a given, no? But she didn't. So it was incredible privilege. Yeah, I think privilege is the word. Incredible privilege to have access to all of these worlds, lives, friendships. But somehow friendship was always the key. And to think that some of them, most of them actually have stayed. I think all the people, all the friends that are in my Let's See are still there. And that was very heartening to see.
Yeah.
That was something special. But I wanted to tell you one thing when you said about the cremation or the funeral. So as always, I take my first copy to my mother and she looks at it and she's looking at it and she knows many of the people and she says, Kajri hegi hai, that's Amar. He looks like a sadhu, but that's Amar over there. But she says, but we know he's no sadhu. Stuff like that. So she's looking through the book, she's seeing herself, she's seeing her, and then suddenly she comes to this photograph, which I'm just going to show you because when I show it to you, you know what it... So she's looking at Kishori ji with her Guru Behan, and she's consoling her. And then there's Gangubai ji, and somebody has died. I don't remember who it was, but it must be a holy person because of the amount of, because of the body, how they've kept the body. And then she opens this page and she says, hey, daddy again? And I said, I'm so sorry, Mummy. I thought you knew. she had not come inside because women were not allowed for the cremations in those days, you know. Only men went. But somehow, because I had a camera, I was gender neutral, so I could go in. So I got the picture. And I said, I'm really, really sorry that you had to see it in the book like this. And she said, no, thank you, thank you. Now I finally have closure. And this is like, what, 30 years later. So, yeah, I just remembered that story because you were talking about the funeral. And that's her after someone else's funeral. So this was the thing about the archive, that somehow I had so many funerals. And I had so many things going on with hair. I don't know why. And this book could also be called Lying Around, because it seems like everyone is a little smoked up and lying around, and nobody really was. But it was the way we were. We didn't sit around like this. More likely there would be mattresses on the floor with gautakiyas, and then it's bound to happen that you lean a little this way, lean a little that way, and at some point you lie down. It's not such a big deal, but you couldn't think of that over here in this situation.
And as you're saying that, the images for people who are in them or were participants in your universe at that time and kind of stay now, they mean something specifically. They might remember the moment. They address them in a different way to people who are coming to your world now. They read in a completely different manner, the way I look at them, and I was trying to kind of think about them in terms of access and like social structure at that time and whatnot. And I think that the way the image, of course, acts as an aid to memory, and you said even for yourself, it acts as an aid to memory, but then here it becomes this larger kind of, there is this larger kind of momentum to the images and what they mean, that it keeps going back to that gesture you feel that you are committed to making, which is taking the individual image out of itself and putting it in relation to other images.
Yeah.
And it lives in this book in a very different way as it does in, say, House of Love or Dream Villa, where again, the gutter kind of plays a role in taking the imageness out of the image. So, the idea of working to kind of take the image out and of itself. And you've done that not just in the making of the image and creating all these different contexts in which to receive it, and here we're in one of that, but this idea of distribution and modes of distribution, and maybe you can talk about it a little bit before we enter the next phase of this evening, which is how you are interested in the distribution of images and what you're doing with this book, because you never judge a book by its cover, and here you are on the cover of your book, and then now you're giving us 30 other covers. So again, maybe we can think a little bit about the idea of distribution of images and the idea of edition as well.
Those are very big questions.
Big questions to end on.
Okay, I'll do it as quickly as possible. To me, art is for dissemination. And photography has the tools of dissemination built into it. So an image, as we all know, can exist on your phone, can be a print, a book, a curtain, a rug, all kinds of things are possible. I'm very interested in that aspect of photography, of the dissemination, rather than the single image. Single image has never been of interest to me because I am used to 36 images. I am used to 12 images. So pulling out one image was always felt like a compromise to me. But making books, making posters, and that work then living in your house, to me is really the greatest privilege. It's a great privilege to be in a big museum collection, but it's equally, sometimes even more of a privilege to be that little box that's sitting on your bookshelf with 9 of my little museums in it, which when you feel like, or your son feels like, he can have his own exhibition. So that beats any museum, like in Calcutta on Park Street. In 2008, I put center letter into the vitrines of Satram Das Jewelers. It's on Park Street, next to Fleury's. 2008 to 2018. Can you calculate the footfalls on Park Street? And if only 1% paid attention to the book, what are the numbers we are talking about? 10 years on Park Street. And 2018, I went there and I removed Center Letter and I put Museum Bhavan. That is an exhibition that is right there on the footpath. You don't have to buy the book, you can see the work, versus, you know, great privilege to be in the museums and have your work shown there, but you know, it's for 3 months, 6 months, and the rest of the time it sits in storage. So somehow, right from the beginning, from 99, when I had that exhibition in Salegaon, and all the people came and took their images home, this idea of living in the domestic archive, and it's so possible with photography, you know? Yeah. When you're a sculptor or a painter, it's more complicated. Even so, posters, I keep encouraging all my friends, and I would still say to everybody, you have to make more posters, because that's how I can have your work, even in Goa, for example, you know, where you would be it's difficult to have works on paper. But if there was a poster that you would make, then I can have that. So the dissemination is key to me. And sometimes I feel that maybe making a photograph or the image is 10% of the work, and the real part of photography for me, the 90%, is the dissemination in all its forms. So it's really important that images go out. That was the dissemination part.
And then there was the idea of the edition in relation to this idea of mass dissemination and the idea of edition and, you know, the book and now the 30 covers. So before we actually get to you distributing the 30 covers.
So you mean the Amazon part?
Yes.
So this is a book that Steidl worked very hard, and as I said, probably lost money to make it 20 euros, so that in India it would be available for 1900 to 2000 rupees for what the euro was, you know, a few months ago. And so I was very happy that by the time it came to India, the euro was 2000 rupees, so this book was available for 2000 rupees. We had a very private launch in Salegaon, where Vivek Menezes released the book, and the people from the village sang a blessing for me because they thought finally I could be called a Salegaonkar or something like that. I don't think they would still call me a Salegaonkar, but from Salegaon, like the, not bride of Salegaon, but something like that. So it was sold for 2000 rupees. And I was coming here with the idea that, yes, we're going to sell this book and it'll be 2000 rupees and maybe we'll have 70 copies. And so 70 people will come, 60, 30, whatever we sell is fine, and rest will keep selling. Then I go to Amazon, and I find that the book is 1600 rupees on Amazon, and there, by my own India distributor, CMYK. So the distributor is giving their books straight to Amazon. And I said, you want to kill the bookshops? You want to kill the book launch? I mean, it hasn't even been launched properly. It's not even been reviewed. And, you know, you put it $16.99. Why should it be $16.99? This is not a book that nobody wants, that you're going to discount it. And he said, no, but, you know, Amazon is like that, and if I hadn't done it, somebody else would do it. People buy it, and then they put it on Amazon. So I love a good problem, because I know something is going to come out of it, and it's probably thanks to that design process. And so I said to Radhi, I'm going to fix this. I'm going to fix the distributor, and I'm going to fix Amazon. And so I made 30 different covers. Dust jackets, you know? So you can buy this special edition with this special dust jacket. So you've got the book below, but this is the special edition, and it comes in a bag like that. And that is 4,500 rupees. And 2,000 rupees, which I'll sign and stamp for you, so I individualize it for you. Or Amazon, where guess what? This morning, the book is now 1,900 rupees. So that distributor realized he's actually losing money because we're having a launch. And now we'll run out of books over here. So now people are going to go to Amazon. So why should he get 1,600? So he's made it 1,900. So, you know, I mean, I think for those of us who make books, we have to deal with this and have to make these special editions. And here is an example when I think the edition really works, where we make something and you say this is a special edition and you can't get this on Amazon, you can only buy one, because I know there are many people here who would happily say, Dayanita, I'll take that whole wall, but no, you can only have one. Or you can buy the book for 2,000 rupees, but you don't get the bag. Or you can go home and go to Amazon and get it for 1,900 rupees. The choice is yours, but at least I've laid it all out there.
So I think on that note, we will conclude and people can choose what they want to do. Thank you,
And it's really fine if you don't want any of the special editions, that's fine too. Radhi, because till yesterday we were having a book launch. All of you have been invited for a book launch. Now Radhi says, let's just keep it on for a week now. We've got an exhibition.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you.